Bruce Lee is like, well, I've learned something from this. And Wong Jack Man is like, and I have washed enough dishes to go home. My name is Nate,
My name is Mike.
and what the hell was that?
Bleh.
Yeah. This movie was slightly less entertaining than I anticipated it to be, but just as bad as I anticipated it to be.
You've already seen this film, Nate.
I have, yes. I saw this movie back when it was in theaters, all the way in either 2016 or
I
2017.
feel like it was 2017.
Yeah. And I remember I was working at the movie theater at the time, and I remember that, I worked at like a smaller Cinemark theater
Okay.
as opposed to the one that we've gone to a few times at the mall, which is a lot bigger.
Right.
And there were just some times where, like, I don't want to say limited theatrical run because that kind of when you hear that you tend to think of like more indie movies and stuff like
Right.
that. But
Well, what the hell is this?
this was something that was still like heavily promoted. I remember
Wow.
seeing a lot of stuff for it,
Huh.
but it was still it was a movie that did not come to my theater.
Right, okay.
And the way that Cinemark did their stuff, I was allowed to see like any movie I wanted, with a few exceptions and stuff at the theater I worked at. But I could, however, very sparingly, I don't think they wanted you to do this too much, but every so often I could ask for like a pass to go see a movie at another Cinemark theater.
Okay.
So I remember I had to ask for one of those passes, which again was kind of a big deal because they like didn't really want you to do that all that much.
Right.
And I went and saw this movie at the Christiana one, and it was pretty disappointing.
Totally worth it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there were like maybe like two other people in the theater, unsurprisingly. And so this was this movie was weirdly done by like I guess maybe some subsidiary of Blumhouse because it was like Blumhouse
it's
Tilt
Tilt,
or something.
yeah.
I don't know what that
I don't know
means.
what that's about either.
But all the same, Blumhouse in some way or another was connected, which that was just weird.
Interesting, yeah.
And it had WWE Studios helping out.
No
which,
clue. I have no clue what that's all about.
Yeah, my best guess is mainly choreography. Although, as we kind of noted, there were definitely some interactions between Bruce Lee and Wong Jack Man that, like, you plop those characters into a ring and, like, surround them with an audience and have, like, your announcers doing their thing, and it would totally play as, like, WWE banter.
Part of me just thinks that like WWE films realize that just like making movies for the wrestlers to star in does not make a legitimate film company.
Uh-huh.
And so like I feel like there's probably a good couple WWE films out there that are them trying to like make actual movies.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, I can't remember the name of the movie off the top of my head, but there is this one like horror movie that I know WWE Studios is involved with. And I wonder if Blumhouse has anything to do with that one too, because that would make at least a little bit more sense.
Could be. Yeah.
Anyway, all the same, yeah, that one is WWE related, and I like can't remember there being any like WWE people in it. So I would imagine that similar to this, it's probably their attempt to try to make some movies instead of just WWE movie star kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, that's this movie is not that good.
Nah.
Also, not that entertaining.
Yeah.
I won't say it's the most boring movie we've ever seen. I had more fun watching this than definitely some other stuff.
Right.
I would probably take this over Jurassic World 2.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think I would too.
yeah, but still not anything to write home about.
Yeah, I think that's about how I feel too. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else of note before we start talking about this plot?
Well, I mean, like, I'll get to this at the end, but, like, dude, the character of Steve could have been completely written out of this film,
Oh yeah.
and it would have been fine.
Yeah, I guess we might as well talk about like that at least to some extent right now. Is that one of the things that's like really weird about this movie is that of course the way that the movie was marketed, the way that you would expect it to be just by merit of it being like a movie that has Bruce Lee associated
Titled
with
Birth
it.
of the Dragon.
Yeah, you kind of imagine Bruce Lee to kind of be more of a main character, but really Bruce Lee, as well as like every other character, really is kind of like this weird like side character almost for this random fictional white dude whose name is like Steve McKee, who is a student of Bruce Lee and who is constantly trying to become a student of this other dude. So clearly he's like not really, he doesn't care too much about Bruce Lee specifically. Like he's happy to train under other people. But yeah, he's kind of like the main character of this story, but he's like so bland and not developed in any way. There's not any defining characteristics really. He's just such a like a blob of white paint that just like walks around this movie.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's really weird. But
I want to see a chart of like screen time.
Yeah, I think that'd be pretty interesting. It would definitely be very like a large portion of it would be for Steve. But I guess we'll get into the movie, and it starts off with Wong Jack Man, and he is in the Shaolin Mountains, I think. Is that where the Shaolin monks are? I don't know.
Yes.
Anyway, wherever the Shaolin monks do their thing,
Right.
he is there. And there seems to be some kind of like demonstration going on between what's later described as the Shaolin monks who do their kung fu and this other unnamed thing that does like Tai Chi. And so they're doing a demonstration, and it seems to be pretty evenly matched and stuff until Wong Jack Man gets knocked over by this Tai Chi dude, to which then you see the fury burning in Wong Jack Man's eyes, and he gets up and does a crazy jump kick to the dude, and then it cuts to black. Then we take up our story in San Francisco, where Bruce Lee, and it's said to be 9 years before the real life movie Enter the Dragon is made and happens, where Bruce Lee is teaching kung fu to a wide range of people in Chinatown.
Yep.
Yeah, and not really anything really too crazy going on other than we get a brief introduction to our white guy Steve and his other buddy whose name I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember it either.
But all the same, Bruce Lee comes up to them as they're like doing their training and stuff, and he's like, "Hey, unnamed dude, you better quit your gambling. I hear that you've been getting into some trouble with that.
Yeah, right.
And none of my students are allowed to gamble."
Right.
And then he's like, "Oh, sorry, Sifu Lee, I won't anymore," or something like that.
Steve is like doing his thing, and yeah, he's just doing like kung fu, and Bruce Lee's like, "You feel good or some shit?" And he's like, "Yeah, I feel pretty good about it." And Bruce Lee's like, "All right, let's fight a little bit," and like totally embarrasses him, and he's all like, "I sensed anger inside of you during our fight. Like, what are you so mad about?" And Steve is kind of like, "I don't want to talk about it," and like goes outside, and it's kind of like that. That's a scene that happens.
Yeah.
That happens. Bruce Lee's like, "Did you take boxing?" And Steve's like, "No." And Bruce Lee's like, "Someone taught you how to punch your father, maybe?" And Steve's all like,
"Harumph."
Maybe you could say something like that. Yeah, or whatever. Yeah. And so that scene happens.
Oh, yeah, because then we were like, oh, this character has a sad backstory,
or
I'm
whatever.
sure. Or has a hard time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that happens. And then I guess later that evening, unnamed buddy to Steve is then leaving the place for the night. He goes out into the alley where like two cars pull up and dudes get out.
Yep.
And they're like, "Hey, unnamed dude, where's our money from the gambling that you lost?" And he's like, "I'll get it. Just give me some time." And then they start roughing him up. Oh, yeah, Bruce Lee does his movie thing at some point, but whatever.
Right, yeah.
Not even worth bringing up.
Well, yeah, not really.
Yeah, so then basically he's getting roughed up, and then Bruce Lee comes out and is like, "Hey, knock it off. I'm Bruce Lee." And then he beats the crap out of all of them, and he's like, "He'll pay you your money. Now get out of here. Tell Auntie Blossom to wait for his or her money."
Yeah, that is pretty much that, isn't it?
Then I guess at this point is when we have Steve going to like his job, which we only see like the one time, where he delivers like linen and stuff to like restaurants and stuff in the area. So he's
Right. Right.
yeah, so he's dropping off a delivery of linen to this place, which like I guess is the like what's the word? The front for Anti Blossom's criminal organization
it's like a
stuff.
restaurant under the control of the mob or the triads, I guess is
Yeah.
what they are.
Exactly. So he's delivering his stuff, and while he's doing that, he's pretty much like, "Hey, I could use a hand. Do you have any pretty ladies to come out here and talk to me?" So then they find their prettiest lady, who then goes out to the van with him,
Right.
and like grabs the rest of the junk, and he's just like, "So, pretty lady," and she like more or less, without saying it, kind of like indicates that maybe she doesn't speak English because this is a Chinese woman, and he is a white guy, and so then he then like tries his best to say like the little bit of Chinese that he knows, which turns out to just be "I eat Steve" as opposed to what he meant to say, which I assume was "I am Steve."
Right.
To which then we find out she actually does speak a little bit of English,
Yeah.
and it is given to us, or the information is given to us in some way or another, that the triad does not want her and the other girls that are under their employment under their employment to be speaking English or know
Right.
how to speak English.
Right.
But she has been essentially sneaking in, reading, and teaching herself how to speak English.
All right. 'Cause all
Um,
these girls
yeah.
are smuggled into America through the triads and then like used for forced labor, more or less,
Exactly.
under the control of the triads. And if they start learning English, that's one step closer to independence than the triads want them to have.
So yeah, so they are doing whatever they can to make sure that doesn't happen. So anyway, Steve is like, "I like the cutty, a lady," and then they
Yeah.
then she goes back to work and he leaves. Who is it? It's like a cousin of somebody, I guess the unnamed dude, like works at this cafe where they're hanging out at. And he's like, "Oh yeah, did you hear that kung fu legend Wong Jack Man is gonna be
right.
like coming in at the port or something?"
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, whoa, no way. I should go and meet him, I guess."
Yep.
And so he's like, "Oh, okay, cool. Here's some Chinese that you can tell him and greet him. It'll be super cool. He'll really appreciate it." And he's like, "Wow, thanks, buddy." So then Steve goes to the port where Wong Jack Man, the monk from earlier, is arriving to San Francisco. And so he meets Wong Jack Man and he's like, "Hello," and says the Chinese stuff that his buddy tells him, to which Wong Jack Man like just starts walking away or something like that. And he's like, hey, what's up? Whoa. And he's like, "You just told me to shine your shoes." And he's like, "Oh, that buddy of mine."
Jesus Christ.
And then he's like, "Listen, man, I would love to train under you." And then Wong Jack Man is pretty much just like, "Oh, you know Kung Fu? White people shouldn't know Kung Fu. You're probably a student of Bruce Lee, right?"
Okay, that's not exactly
That's
what
not
he says.
exactly how he phrases it, but that's the sentiment, essentially.
He's kind of like, "Oh, you're learning kung fu," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm learning kung fu," and he's like, "Well, what have you learned about kung fu?" And he's like, "I learned how to kick ass." And this guy's like, "Kung fu is about self-discovery and self-discipline. It's not about kicking ass." And Steve's all like, "Yeah," and so that's about how that goes.
But yeah, so then he's like, "Well, maybe I'll see you around, Steve. I've got dishes to wash." So then he goes to work at the cafe. And yeah, a bunch of useless bullshit happens. I couldn't even tell you what.
Well, Bruce Lee's like, "Why is Wong Jack-man back?" And Steve's all like, "Oh, I went to go see Wong Jack-man when he came in." And Bruce is like, "Why'd you do that?" And he's like, "Oh, you know."
wanted to meet a legend.
Yeah, right. And so Bruce is like, "I think he's here because he wants to embarrass me and ruin my career because he's not happy that kung fu is being taught to white people." And
Yeah.
Steve's like, "Oh, okay, I guess that you really think that?" And Bruce is like, "I totally think that. Look, you're visiting him all the time. Why don't you go ask him to show up after my demonstration against this karate guy later?" And Steve's like, "All right, I guess I'll go do that."
Yep. And
I think at this point he might like go back to the girl at the restaurant and be like, "Here's an English grammar book." Shh.
yeah,
And
that's
then
right. Yeah, he does. That's 100% right.
and then he goes back to Wong, and he's like, "Hey man, teach me some kung fu." And Wong's like, "Drink tea with me." And he's like, "What did you say about kung fu not being about kicking ass?" And Wong's like, "Pretty much just that. It's not about kicking ass." And
Here's some monk wisdom for you.
yeah, and then Steve is all, I don't know, man. I still feel like it's about kicking ass or something. And oh, by the way, Bruce Lee wants you to show up at his exhibition.
Yeah, and then Wong Jack Man is like, you see, this is why Kung Fu is not about kicking ass. Let me tell you why I'm here in America. And then he's like, you see, I accidentally kicked a man to death. And,
Almost to death.
And so because of that, I am here to humble myself and do penance. So that's why Kung Fu is not just about being a badass.
And I'm washing dishes now.
Yes. Yeah, so then he continues to wash dishes and be very humble.
Yep.
And Bruce Lee then does his exhibition thing where he goes against a karate dude and makes him look like an utter fool. And then Wong Jack Man actually does show up, and he catches the tail end of Bruce Lee making a mockery of the karate dude. And then finally Bruce Lee is like, Wong Jack Man, have you come to challenge me? And then Wong Jack Man is like, no, actually I haven't. Your style is poor and is limited. And then Bruce Lee's like, oh yeah? Well then why don't we fight about it? To which Wong Jack Man is like, no, I don't want to do that. I came here to actually do kind of the opposite of that.
Right.
And then everybody leaves, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, I don't even know why the fuck this is in the movie, but then the Triad people show up to the laundromat that is owned by the mother of the gambling dude.
Right.
And they're like, hey, we're here for your son. And then they start breaking shit.
Right.
To which she's like, oh, my son, And then the son comes out and then starts holding his own against these Triad dudes.
Right.
And he does pretty well for a bit. And then he gets his head smashed through the laundromat thing, through the washing machine. And then he gets his ass kicked and wakes up in the hospital. To which then Steve is there, and he's like, oh, man, buddy, I'm so sorry this happened to you. And then he goes and has a nice date with the Chinese girl.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because, like, she sneaks out or some shit and prays, and he visits her doing that.
And then at some point, we don't know how or when, and frankly, I don't care how or when.
Yeah, right.
Someone from the Triad, I guess, then confronts Steve and is like, hey, you get your master, Bruce Lee, to fight Wong Jack Man so we can have a bunch of gambling go on, and we'll let this girl go. And so Steve's like, hot dog, that sounds awesome to me. So as we mentioned, he then goes to Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee's like, I don't care. And then we go to Wong Jack Man, and he's like, hey, can you help me free my hopefully girlfriend? And then here's what you got to do. You just got to fight Bruce Lee. To which Wong Jack Man's like, well, I suppose I could fight Bruce Lee if there was a reason I had to fight.
Right.
And so then he's like, all right, Steve, I'll tell you what. You go tell Bruce Lee to fight me anytime, anywhere.
Right.
And he does just that.
Yes. And so he's like, all right, Bruce Lee, he wants you to fight him in a warehouse. And Bruce Lee is like, all right. And he's like, he also wants there to be rules. And Bruce is like, not all right. There's going to be no rules, but I'll fight in that warehouse. And everyone gets to watch. And he's like, 12 people get to watch. And Bruce is like, all right, fine, 12 people get to watch. And so the fight is scheduled.
Yep, fight is scheduled.
Betting happens.
A couple more interactions of Steve and Wong Jack Man, and Wong Jack Man bestowing wisdom upon Steve. And then the fight happens.
Yes.
And then for some reason, which I guess it's for gambling purposes, the Auntie Blossom lady, the head of the Triads,
Right.
pulls up and is like, all right, let's get this fight going.
Right.
And so, yeah, so they get the fight going. They have a nice back and forth.
Yep.
They go up some stairs.
They jump off the stairs.
Down some stairs.
Yeah.
They expand their limits. And, yeah, nothing really to of note
Wong
happens.
gets knocked down and doesn't respond with a near-fatal kick.
Well, not before getting Bruce Lee in a headlock.
Where he could have killed him, from what I understand.
Yeah. So I guess really the fight ends, and the takeaway is that both of them have a moment where they more or less have defeated one another. First, Wong Jack Man gets Bruce Lee in this headlock where he could have killed him, but
Right.
doesn't, to which I guess you could say Wong Jack Man won.
That
but
seems
then,
to be their understanding of it.
yes. But then the fight continues, and Bruce Lee then downs Wong Jack Man, where they then kind of sit there for a moment, and then they both kind of relax, and the fight ends.
Yeah, so it's
So,
like a draw.
Yeah, really, it's like a draw. You could say Wong Jack Man won. But anyway, the Anti-Blossom lady is like, well, who the fuck won? To which they're like, I don't know, no one, I guess.
Right.
And then she's like, not too pleased about this. So she basically says, you know what? You fucking figure out who won, because otherwise this girl isn't getting let go.
Right.
And so then she goes back to her Triad restaurant place.
And so Steve goes to Wong first and is like, I'll say you won. And Wong is like, but I didn't win. Because to me, victory would be Bruce Lee seeing the
something.
error of his ways and coming out of his like overconfident, brash self to adjust his style. Because his style is being limited by his own ignorance. And that's what I wanted to teach him. And if I won the battle and Bruce becomes more bitter and doubles down on his style, then I have truly lost. But if I say I lost and Bruce Lee responds to that by expanding his style, then I will have truly won. So then Steve is like, all right, then say you lost. And Wong is like, no, I can't do that either. And I'm not entirely sure why he can't do that, but he says he can't do that either. And he gives an explanation, but I forget what it is. And so, meanwhile,
And
Bruce
it's probably
Lee,
dumb.
free of Steve, is kind of like in a separate room, just like, oh man, I totally lost to Wong. Like, that's whack. I need to, become a better fighter and have a better philosophy because Wong, like, beat me.
And maybe change my style.
Yeah, and like, dude, like if Steve's just talked to Bruce first, then he could have just gone back and been like, yeah, Wong won, but whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Also, as you might have just said this because I had to step out of the room, but also, like, the thing that Mike and I point out is that, Wong Jack Man is supposed to be a very humble man. This whole process is supposed to be about humbling himself and doing penance. It seems like it should be very easy for him to be like, you know what, this is actually super unimportant to me, and my entire reason for doing this fight was to free this girl. So if all I have to do to free this girl is right now be like, oh yeah, by the way,
right,
I lost.
right.
That should be an easy decision to make.
Yeah, you'd figure, right? But,
But teaching Bruce Lee is a very important lesson, even though he already did
learned. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Yeah, so basically Wong Jack Man is like, well, sorry, I did all I could. And Steve's like, you know what? I'm going to go and do this myself. So then he then goes to hang out with his buddy who's out of the hospital. And he's like, all right, buddy, I'm going to go do this myself. And the buddy's like, what? No, you can't. But he does it anyway. And so then the buddy goes and tells Bruce Lee. So then Steve goes ahead and he just marches right into the Triad restaurant.
Yep.
And he's like, hey, buddy, I got a bone to pick with you. And he throws a punch. And he is kind of standing his own ground here until he isn't. And then he gets the shit kicked out of him, and he
Yeah.
gets thrown right out the door he came in.
Yeah, he really gets whooped.
So then he starts crawling on the ground, and they really, sell that he got the shit kicked out of him because he's like bleeding. He's like, oh God, like crawling
Yeah,
up
right,
against the
right.
wall.
Yeah.
To which a car pulls up, and much to his delight, who steps out of that car but Bruce Lee and Wong Jack Man.
Yep.
And they're basically like, dude, you're a fucking idiot,
Right.
and we're here to clean up your mess.
But you're our idiot.
So we're here to clean up your mess.
Right.
So then they go in, and it's funny because, like, one dude is like, oh, no, please, not Wong Jack Man and Bruce Lee.
Right.
But then this other dude just has this amazing stance, and
Yeah,
he's
it's
like, all
incredible.
right, let's go.
Yeah.
So then probably the best choreography of the movie, but even still, it's pretty hit or miss. There are some moments where it's like, oh, wow, that was neat and pretty creative. And then there's other moments where it's like, yep, he sure kicked that guy in the face.
Right.
But yeah, so anyway, what do you know? Bruce Lee and Wong Jack Man kick the crap out of everybody, with Bruce Lee kind of leading the charge at first, while Wong Jack Man does his monk-like, meditative-like observation, I guess.
Right.
Until eventually he does start kicking ass. They kick everybody's ass, and then they, well, of course, not before Bruce Lee then jumps down the staircase just to meet with Wong Jack Man and then walk back up the staircase.
Right.
But they make it up. They walk into the room. Oh, no, actually, hang on. Let me rephrase this.
Sure.
So, yeah,
please.
so they Bruce Lee jumps down the staircase. They walk right back up the staircase, and then beat the crap out of two more guys.
Right.
And then right when they're about to go through those doors, a dude who's now at the bottom of the staircase pulls out a gun and is like, this is what you don't see in those kung fu movies, is when a guy pulls a gun.
Yeah, right.
And then Steve comes up and hits him in the head with a glass bottle
Boo.
and saves the day. So then they end up going into the room of the Triad boss lady and some other dude who came by at some point and was like, hey, I am invested in this and I'm also a Triad person. But yeah, basically they go in and they more or less have like the conversation that should have been had already, where like they come in and they're like, hey, release the girl. And they're like, look, we fucking said we would. Just tell us who won.
Yeah,
And they're
right.
like, oh, okay, he won. And then they're like, all right, cool. Well, do you accept that, Bruce Lee? And then Bruce Lee kind of like pauses for a moment. He's like, no,
Jesus Christ.
I don't accept that. And everybody's like, huh?
Yeah, right.
And then he's like, but I will accept it if you let all of the girls go. Because also at some point the girl like was given information, or the girl was, it was explained to the girl that like she was going to be set free. And she was like, no, I don't want to do that unless all of my other lady friends get set free. So Bruce Lee is doing the right thing here. And so basically the mob bosses look at each other and are like, all right, I mean,
sure.
we can do that. And then like, I guess as they're about to shake for it, this just random fucking dude who I guess we saw earlier and Bruce Lee like broke his leg or something.
There's a story Bruce Lee tells about like
When
he was in China, he fought the son of a Triad boss and broke his leg. And the Triad boss was like, look, you go to America and I won't kill you. And we won't mess with each other because you broke my son's leg. So I know you're not to be messed with.
That's right.
So this is that son.
Yeah, but anyway, so he who like has been like a dude who's working for the Triad here, is like, I'm gonna kill you, you bastard, and then he pulls out a shotgun, but Bruce Lee is so inhumanly fast that he kicks him and he like flies through something. So then Bruce Lee is like, well, I've learned something from this. And Wong Jack Man is like, and I have washed enough dishes to go home. So then
kinda.
Bruce Lee continues to further his career, and Wong Jack Man goes home, and Steve gets the girl.
There you go.
And then the credits roll.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's this movie.
Yeah, really not much happened in this film. And it was a very confusing film at that.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, I mean, again, I was just like, some of the reviews that I read will kind of get at this. I don't know a whole lot about Bruce Lee and his life. I remember about the time this movie came out, for whatever reason, I was super interested in him and like read a few things about him and watched some cool videos of stuff he's done. But
Right.
I will by no means say that I know, next to anything about him really, but it seems like his life is interesting enough. He could have made like I don't want to say just a straight up biography. It still could be like an action flick biopic. But like it seems like that is a much like kind of easier thing to do than taking like one like fight that happened in his life and then making a bunch of fictional characters and building a story around it.
Right.
Like it just seems like there's enough interesting stuff that happened in his life that you could have just kind of did a more straightforward biopic.
I agree.
But yeah, also another thing that we kind of noted is that it seems like everybody in this movie is like kind of like a fucking antagonist.
Right.
You know? It's like
Well, kind of. I guess except for Wong, kind of.
yeah. But yeah, it's weird. I
And
feel
Steve
like
isn't meant to be, but I just don't like him. So
Yeah.
fuck him. I mean, he's not an antagonist in that sense, but he's not a character I like,
yeah.
and he contributes less to the story than he gives to it. So
Yeah, I mean, of course, the true antagonists are supposed to be the triad, but like, it's just through most of their interactions, it seems like Bruce Lee is kind of set up as the antagonist, whereas Wong is more or less the voice of reason, and Bruce Lee is like, I want money and fame, fight me.
Right.
Which, yeah, just interesting way to portray a character who you're like trying to like make a movie that's
Who the
like
movie is
based on their
ostensibly about.
legacy.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I don't know, very weird. But are you ready to read some reviews here?
Yeah. Let's read some reviews.
Okay, I got 2 each, and they're
It's
both
the Mama Church
pretty
Review
short.
Hour.
Okay. So I'm going to start with my 1-star review, and this is pretty straight to the point. I'm going to assume this person knows a little bit more about Bruce Lee than I do. But this is from a user named Justin Tam, 1-star review, and it reads, worst account of Bruce Lee's fight against Wong Jack Man. According to eyewitnesses' accounts, Lee beat Wong Jack Man in 3 minutes. Do not watch this movie. It's trash.
Huh, I hadn't known that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. If so, again, that's like it seems like the much more interesting story could have been like
right.
Bruce Lee overcoming the odds and fighting this monk and beating his ass. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, so
definitely there.
that seems like kind of the better way to go. But yeah, that's my 1-star review. You want to read one?
Sure. My 1-star review comes from. Who'd you say?
Justin Tam.
Oh, this is Justin Franklin.
Oh wow, how about
All
that?
right. Yeah, how about that indeed? All right. What do I think of this movie? Well, I'm 40. I have researched on
I
Bruce
did
Lee
see
for
this one,
years,
yeah.
and I know a fair bit. This is a cash cow movie using his fame. In this, they make him out to be overly cocky, brash, like almost a bully. Lee had charisma, confidence, a great outlook on life and people, and this movie was one step away from being one of those bad lip-syncing movies where they fly through the air with ease for 10 feet at a time. And the last fight was just, well, anyway, best way to judge a movie is to see it yourself. If you know nothing of Lee, then I would imagine you'd think this is a second-rate martial arts film. If you know of Lee and respect him and his ability, then you will dislike this, like myself and many more.
Well, to be fair, there is some very bad wire jump-esque things. that
Yeah,
do happen in this
I
movie.
don't know much about Lee, and I do think this was a second-rate martial arts movie with like a really weird, unnecessary subplot involving some dude named Steve who could have been, again been written out of this movie.
Which that's the thing too, is it's like to me it feels like much more of an A plot than a subplot, which is the weird thing.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Yes, it is the A plot, and it's completely ridiculous and unnecessary. It shouldn't be given that much attention. It shouldn't have existed anyway.
Yeah, I don't think that this is. I still think this was stupid of them, but I think that the reason that he's like written to be this like cocky, overconfident dude who like is honestly kind of an ass is like, I guess to illustrate the point that like the Bruce Lee that is loved is the Bruce Lee who learned that he needs to change and refine his style because he is flawed.
Right. Yeah.
Even still, weird to make the guy whose legacy you're honoring come off as a dick.
Yeah, It's a
Weird.
yeah, it's a
Weird.
choice.
Next we have opposite side of the spectrum. We have a 5-star review, and this is from Billy Ringer, and it reads, "Loved it, beautifully done, amazing fight scenes, good lessons taught, humor and beauty all mixed into one. This movie has some serious heart and soul. My wife and I were both shocked to see the poor reviews on this, wondering if these people actually watched the movie all the way through. This made both of our favorite movie
Whatever,
lists.
Billy.
I'm glad they liked it, but I did not."
I'm gonna read what seems to be the most comprehensive and really the only worthwhile 5-star review I can see on this thing, and this is from Mike DiStefano, Las Vegas.
You good?
Yeah, but Billy was delusional real quick. I realized I didn't mention that. Billy's delusional. That whole, like, shocked to see the poor reviews, wondering if these people actually watch all... Like, there's some thing that happens in, like, the last 15 minutes where they're like, I wasn't into the film before this, but now I can't help but give it 5 stars.
Well, because that's the thing, too, is, like, I'll be very honest. Again, like, while I'm not, like, a Bruce Lee history buff, when this movie came out, I was like kind of in like a little period where I was like, wow, Bruce Lee's pretty cool. I'd like to learn more about him. And it just so happened that this movie was coming out. So I saw this movie and I really wanted to like it.
Right.
And coming out of the theater, I almost kind of was like, no, it wasn't that bad. Like,
right.
no, it was cool. But like, I can't lie to myself. Like, that movie sucked.
Yeah, it was bad. But
Yeah.
anyway, Mike DiStefano from Las Vegas has this to say. The film is phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. Excellent acting, excellent directing, brilliant editing, and brilliant cinematography. Shooting any action film is ridiculously daunting and extremely complex. Critics of this film who have denounced it should be ashamed. To set out on an endeavor to capture any biographical period of the great Bruce Lee's life is a remarkable challenge, because every single physical move the man executed was flawless. That's why so few bioepics of him have been made. Most filmmakers shy away from such a challenge. The writers, director, editor, and cinematographer of Birth of the Dragon all performed brilliantly. And the 2 actors portraying Lee and Mann were indescribably stunning. Forget about the acting for a moment, which in itself was magnificent. I mean, who else has ever captured Bruce Lee's mannerisms, unique trademark speech and accent, etc.? The physical executions were absolutely spellbinding. I implore you to watch the actual warehouse fight scene 10 times in a row and in slow motion, and find one single flaw in their physical movement. To all the critics out there who gave this film anything short of 5 frickin' stars, you try to make this film about this legendary fight that changed Kung Fu forever. Just try it and see what you come up with. My sincerest gratitude to all who participated in the creation of this wondrous film and for inspiring the world and continuing Lee's legacy. Lee's family should be grateful to the actors, writers, editor, photographer, and director of this timeless masterpiece. 5 stars.
I don't know why. I really thought he was going to be like, go watch the fight scene 10 times and you'll love it.
Hell.
I will say, I think, to be fair, because we did a watch along for this movie, which first time we did that, by the way. Hope you guys enjoy.
Right.
There were some points during like pretty much every fight scene where there were some moments where it was kind of laughable, like maybe there was some like weird CG or something.
Yeah.
And I don't want to understate that because there are moments like that. In the moments that aren't like that, because they are kind of few and far between. Yeah, they're in every fight, but it's not like every step of the fight is really like terrible like that.
Right.
I think overall the actors did a good job with the choreography. I don't think the choreography was like anything special, and it was pretty cut and dry, just based on we see so much like crazy choreographed action stuff these days. I guess it's easy to be kind of desensitized, so I'll give them that. But I don't think they like were laughably bad in the execution of the
No,
choreography.
no, not
I
at
just
all.
think there were certain moments, especially where like CG was put in,
Right.
where it was like, okay, that is really corny. And bad.
Right.
But again, I don't want to necessarily knock the actors because I do think they did a pretty good job with the choreography that they did.
Well, this was just a film that I don't think had any place for wire work. Like, I don't know why
Yeah.
you're doing it. It makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can just have well choreographed kung fu scenes.
Right,
and-
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Weird.
yeah. Plus, I can't help but notice these fucking 5-star reviews, no mention of Steve. Not a single mention
Yeah.
of Steve. Because they're like, Bruce Lee, the physical movements, incredible capturing of his life. I'm like, dude, like 1/4 of the film was about like Bruce Lee's life, like generously. The
Yeah.
other 3/4 of the film were about Steve doing stupid, not even stupid, but just Steve focused nonsense that I couldn't give a single fuck about. So like to act like this was actually a movie about Bruce Lee's fight, like 1/5 of this film was about Bruce Lee's fight. The rest of it was about like Steve's struggle to like enter a relationship with this Chinese indentured servant. So like, what the fuck are we even talking about with this film? Like, you don't understand how it could get anything less than 5 stars when there's an entire like majority of the movie that you're not even commenting upon. Like, it's silly.
Well, that's the thing too. Is I think this kind of leads back to what I was saying about like really wanting to like this movie when I first saw it. Is that like I think that, like you say, these people don't mention Steve in their 5-star reviews.
right.
I think it's because like these people, whether they want to admit it or not, are probably kind of in denial. They
Oh, you
just
think?
love Bruce Lee
They've just
so
blocked
much
out the
because
Steve
again,
part.
Bruce Lee. I don't know how much of his myth or how much of the character of Bruce Lee is myth or fact. I don't really know, but like the concept of Bruce Lee, from what I have seen and like read about what little it is, he seems like a badass. He's a cool dude.
Mhm.
You like Bruce Lee, and therefore you really want to see Bruce Lee do cool things. And I
Right.
feel like these people are just kind of in denial that this movie that's kind of about Bruce Lee is bad. And so therefore they're just like, no, this movie is great. Bruce Lee is awesome.
Yeah. Well, whatever. They're wrong. I don't care what they say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with that, are you ready to do some ratings here?
Let's do it.
All right. Yeah, Bruce Lee seems pretty cool. I'd love to watch or see, maybe even read about Bruce Lee's actual life. He seems like a pretty interesting character. And I'm sure this movie doesn't do him justice. But, as we stated, this movie is not a biopic about Bruce Lee. This movie is about a white guy named Steve and how he really wants to get with a Chinese indentured servant.
Yeah.
And that's not my kind of movie. So I'm going to give this a out of. And yeah, I mean, I watched this several years ago. I watched this with my buddy Mike for this podcast. I don't think I'll be watching this movie ever again.
Yeah, I don't know much about Bruce Lee, and frankly, that probably stands to the point that like I don't really care to know much about Bruce Lee. I mean, I'm sure he's a cool dude. It just doesn't seem like my type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
This movie does him no service.
Yeah.
Your cats are cooler than this movie was.
That's true. Yeah, we had a wonderful time with the cats laying around.
Yeah. So with that, adding on to the experience, I'll give this a out of. That's about as high as I'll go.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly reasonable and extremely generous at that. And WWE Studios, you never fail to make a bad movie.
Oh yeah.
And I wish you nothing but the best of luck on your next endeavor.
God bless them if they still exist.
Oh yeah. And with that, we'll catch you next time. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. There's one thing that I forgot to mention. This episode is sponsored. This episode is sponsored by none other than us. We would like to mention this is the first episode that we have recorded since we have launched our Patreon. So if you enjoy our content in the slightest and have $5 extra to burn every month, feel free to toss it our way, and we can use that money to hopefully advertise and do some other stuff to grow the podcast. And also, we'd just love to see that you guys are enjoying the content. Currently, we have every single episode that we have ever done released in its unedited form on Patreon. By the time that this is up, there'll also be a few Patreon exclusive things here and there, and we'll continue to do some more things that are Patreon exclusive, as well as give you sneak peeks at what we're working on. So again, if you have any extra cash, steal it from your mom if you have to. We could certainly use it.
Right.
So with that, thank you so much for listening, and yeah, that's that.
Smash that. Wait, do you smash anything on Patreon?
Smash that input your credit card information button.
Oh God.
But yeah, it's been cool. Thank you for all the support thus far.
Yes.
And
thank you for even listening to us, frankly.
Yeah, and absolutely, I don't know why I said that. And we're planning to kind of expand the content that we put out on the channel. We are going to be doing some watch-alongs here and there, like the
with
one
Mama
that we did
Church
for this movie. And we've also tossed around some ideas for some other stuff. So if there's anything specifically that you guys would like to see, whether that be movies that you'd like us to watch and cover, or just some other content that you think that it'd be cool to see from us, let us know. And we will catch you next time. Thank you for listening.
Shabam.